A Six Nations turns so quickly. It's a competition with fewer games than the PS5, and yet it occupies such importance to the rugby community, it would overshadow one of those being a HD remaster of Jonah Lomu Rugby. Contract extensions, test careers, and this year, chances to earn the greatest honour any home nations rugby player can possibly achieve can swing on whether your team has a good or bad outing in rugby's greatest championship, TM. And this year, things are even more intense than ever, with 5 teams all capable of beating each other. National feel-good factor is only ever a single scrum or one wide pass away from falling apart, and that's kind of been the way for both Ireland and England this year. 2 championships where almost every result could have gone either way, coming to a head as they met for a game that would decide which had a good Six Nations and which was headed for the tedious trials and tribulations of questioning the coach. So, how did Ireland dismantle England, and where does this leave Eddie Jones's outfit after an all-time low finish, in case anyone wasn't aware? Considering this wound up being the most comprehensive smashing Andy Farrell has given his son since he forced Owen to pick Zimbabwe to play against Team Lomu, I'm going to start in a kind of weird place. When everything is going well for them, I genuinely do buy the Eddie branded bullshit that England might be the best team in the world. England at their best play near unstoppable phase play rugby, and England at their best can achieve this perfection 3-4 times a game, picking their moments, knowing the 20 odd points they can generate in those periods allow them to basically park the Julian Surveyor in between. We saw these perfect passages twice against Wales, both times leading to a try, and then repeatedly against France, gifting them control of a game they really should have won far sooner. The problem is, in rugby, things aren't always going well for you. And if things aren't always going well for England, they drop from being possibly the best team in the world to a bag of shit. And whilst a lot of Ireland's game is still piecing itself together, there's one thing that's absolutely undeniable. Ireland are phenomenal at making sure that everything doesn't go well for you. England like to launch their so-called perfect players off line-out, and whereas Wales got around this by just not giving them any, Ireland instead looked to be absolute, complete and utter pricks at every single set piece. Whereas they stole plenty of ball against Scotland, they only had to get under England's skin and they'd complete the manure metamorphosis themselves and start making mistakes. This was England's first line out of the game, and whilst Ireland can't disrupt the ball, they do disrupt the maul, splitting their resources to hit either side, granting them no momentum to launch off. Youngs has been waiting to play his part in the move, but instead has to run in to kick the ball away, knowing nothing's on. The whole thing has been ruined. Henderson has worked his way around the outside of the maul really smartly without changing his bind, forcing Youngs to spin back towards his touchline wife. He tries to kick the ball away to spend some more time with her, but it's charged down, momentum and attack chance ruined. England do almost launch a play here, using a neat enough backline move to work the ball out towards the touchline, whilst Ford, Farrell and the forwards find formation. This is a fantastic pattern by England, putting multiple runners in each Irish defender's face. However, there's one exception. Normally, Murray would be forced to make a decision on who to tackle, and England can send whoever he doesn't go for through a gap. Except Murray's quite happy to just stand off and wait, because Ollie Lawrence is totally alone here, making it an easy defensive read. He can just wait. If we rewind a moment and Johnny May is stood on this wing, it's a totally different picture and space opens up for a clear bust. So, why isn't May here? Why is May not in position? If we rewind further, right back to the start of the move, May is part of the initial line, but after the ball goes out and the tackle is made, Bundyucky busts a gut to come in and compete. He isn't trying to turn the ball over, he's just being a nuisance. The England forwards are all getting into position for the coming attack, so May sees our key compete and knows it's on him to run in and help clear out. As such, May is in the ruck instead of on the wing to exploit the overlap. This is just one small example of what Ireland did all game. Archie might not win the ball, but he prevents a try scoring chance in 2 phases time. When done well and smartly, these tiny moments of making yourself a nuisance have a huge knock-on, often literally, effect on the opposition. England's attack is deliberately intricate, allowing it to adapt to a defence and break anyone down, but it also gives Ireland so many cogs in the machine to target. Ollie Lawrence here carries a few inches too high, and Henshaw can get under him to hold him up, and what could have been a promising attack a phase or two down the line turns into turnover ball for Ireland. They don't need to destroy every cog they hit, but it only takes one of them to stop rotating for the entire attack to fall apart. Tyburn in particular is so good at being annoying, here tucking himself in as Itoje's support behind before an offside line forms, putting Itoje in a checkmate position where he either gives Byrne the ball or gets held up in the tackle and concedes a scrum. Ireland, on the other hand, kept their own attack simple. At the start of the championship, Ireland's play was obvious. This made life incredibly simple for Wales and France, who were just facing a 2D attack. Proper Jonah Lomu rugby pattern shit. But over the course of the Six Nations, they've evolved their attack into such a way that it's now only obvious to themselves. There are far fewer moving parts than England, Wales or France's attack, but no less oomph, to use the technical term. Take this simple precision of the opening try by Limerick's living tribute to the scream, Keith Earls. This Six Nations, England have gone to some lengths to circumnavigate the fact George Ford is a very passive tackler. He's the kind of guy who gets you to ground, but he might concede 10, even 15 metres first. So, off opposition lineouts, England have helped him by hiding the hooker in the backs next to him, and Tom Curry has defended at scrum half, meaning he can easily work across to cancel out any threats in this channel. We saw France produce, one perfectly valid way of exploiting this last time out, but Ireland like to keep things simpler. All they want to do is drag Curry out so they can open up a hole between him and the other forwards. In order to do this, they first need to engage the rest of the pack. Van der Fleer and Conan start front of the line-out, and as the ball comes in, run around as though they're headed for the back, with Conan to lift and Van der Fleer to jump. Except Van der Fleer slides in to lift Byrne, so England figure, oh, this was the trick. We've worked out, lads. The trick was that they're lifting Tyburn, and they chuck Itoje in the air to counteract it. But Byrne was just a decoy. It was a burner jump, burner, if you will. You won't. The English forwards are tied to the line out, and whereas a scrum half might float to cover the space, knowing they're watching for a chip or a break, Curry rushes to cover Conan as he sees the ball thrown over. Meanwhile, everyone's favourite haunted onion stands with his hands on his hips, disinterested, not part of any coming move, until boom! He just bursts into life. Conan taps the ball down to Earls. The timing is perfect. The forward still engaged, and Curry dragged out too far. All that's left is for Earls to turn Johnny May into Johnny Should Have by obliterating him with a hell of a left foot step. It's the equivalent of a Ferrari getting turned inside out by a snail, but what a goddamn snail, man. Ben Youngs and Keith Earls are both players that's very easy to make fun of, but both of them have had an excellent Six Nations and will deservedly be remembered for what they did on a rugby pitch long after everyone forgets that YouTube twat who made cheap old honky-tonk monkey shines about them. And then, once they've forgotten James Haskell, they'll forget me as well. Whilst there are still risks, such as this short side moment by Murray that would give Joe Schmidt a heart attack, Ireland play with a mix of pragmatism and dynamism that makes them as annoying to defend as they are to attack. And there's no better example of that than the try finished by yet another of the 3D printed class lens to back rowers, Jack Conan. Van der Fleer breaks off the maul before it holds, and Ireland begin to play. Jub Sex Stage realises it's at least 6-7 minutes since he last ran a loop, and Ireland begin to put together some really nice phases that would far better please Mr. Schmidt. They initially make very little ground, but once they get beyond about 10 phases, all played pretty fast, the space starts to open up. This moment, a sequence of lovely passes and offloads, is very nice, and it shows Ireland not adding something to attacking game, and all this dynamism and shit. But the most important thing is actually hidden behind this moment. So, to get a sense of how Ireland opened England up, keep a close eye here as we watch it again on tight head prop Kyle Sinclair. He makes the initial hit on Byrne and gets right back up to his feet and jogs back into the line. He would normally take up position around here-ish, but the combination of pace and patience Ireland are playing with means England have no chance to reshuffle into their usual shape, rather playing the adapted one they've fallen into. As such, Sinclair has to jog around behind the ruck and take up position on the wing. Here, Conan can then use his footwork to drift outside and make some extra metres in the carry. This isn't a one-off. England forwards are constantly worked left and right repeatedly. You can call this work rate on their behalf, but the end result is still chaos. They've got no idea where they're supposed to be standing. England are utterly disorganised, and May has had to come up to try and make the defensive picture so appear, somewhat competent, leaving this space undefended. Jigsaw, Sexsaw, Hangs It, Daly and May both have to cover more ground and running at angles, whereas Keenan is just headed in a straight line onto the ball from closer and regathers superbly. This disorganises England further. If we rewind again, check how slow their dawdle is until after Keenan's actually caught the ball. They get caught offside and then caught short. Once again, a forward is out of position as Dom Day? Is it Dom Day? No, he played Wales, didn't he? whoever this is, thunders up like an old-fashioned 13 to try and make the hit, but he fails to communicate what he's doing to Ford on account of not being real. This leaves Ireland with a 2-on-1 and England scrambling to cover. They survive a few phases until Jewish soccer expert carries himself down the short side. George Ford is the only guy in the ruck, so Karen Dickey comes in to give him a hand, but this is really poor by Tom Curry, who doesn't check where his teammates are, but the moment he checks where the opposition are, Conan takes his chance and goes straight through the enormous gap Curry has created, stretching out to score. It's a brilliantly constructed try. Ireland, as ever, playing their own brand, but it causes England to open themselves up, making so many mistakes. When talking about Ireland, it's kind of important to look at their championship in full. I do think England played about as badly in Dublin as they have under Eddie Jones, but let's look at it for a moment, right? England's worst game of the championship was against Ireland. Scotland's worst game of the championship was against Ireland. Italy didn't exactly have a vintage year, but I still think their worst game of the championship was against Ireland. France won thanks to 2 moments of excellence, but their worst overall performance of the championship for me was against Ireland. The only side who didn't have their worst game of the championship against Ireland, the one who you might broadly speaking say played kind of well against them, was the team who won the title. There's a common denominator here, and every week it becomes harder and harder to justify calls that this can be a coincidence. It's clearly not. Andy Farrell's Ireland are good. It's just their good looks an awful lot like others being bad. This is normally where England's 10-12 axis comes in. George Ford's biggest strength is his ability to anticipate play phases in advance, and with that comes a sixth sense for spotting when England are about to lose ground or the ball. But Ireland last weekend felt it just as clearly as him, getting up in his face, charging his kicks, and it's not exactly helped by other England players handing him their indigestion for Ford to crap out. This is an awful pass by Ben Youngs, but Curry compounds the error. Ford is running behind, and he either wants to crash it up or to just lift the ball on his right for Ford to run onto, but instead Curry flicks the ball out the back because he thinks it looks fancy. This might seem tiny, but it alerts the entire Irish defence to where Ford is going to catch the ball before he can do it. It also stops Ford running the line he's trying to run, meaning he's unable to take the ball on his own terms. He's having to check himself, to rethink, and Archie the whole time is just able to line him up from miles out. Ford goes for the ambitious pass, but Watson is nowhere near and it flies into touch. Curry was absolutely brilliant against France, but this Six Nations has been littered with overconfident errors and absences for large passages of the game, or, large absences next to the ruck. Just months after me proclaiming him just simply really, really good at rugby, Tom Curry has become an all-or-nothing player out of nowhere in the way people describe Finn Russell or Danny Cipriani. You're either getting someone borderline unplayable, or, on the evidence of the Six Nations, you're getting 10 tackles and a shit haircut. Whilst it's possible Ford threw the ball into touch as a bonding exercise with his halfback partner, it was ultimately for naught as he found himself off the pitch and Dan Robson playing fly half. Whilst Robson threw a hell of a pill for Johnny Mightiswell's late consolation try, this passage was an enormous departure for England under Eddie Jones. England spent 24 minutes on Super Saturday without either George Ford or Owen Farrell on the field. This is not only the longest they've gone without either of them on the pitch since Eddie Jones took over, it's longer than they've spent without one of his two chosen playmakers, without either Ford or Farrell on the pitch, across Jones's previous 63 capped internationals put together. Right, let's just say that again, right? They spent more time on Saturday with neither Ford or Field on the pitch than they had in the previous 63 games put together. That last stanza highlighted just how reliant England are on the pair. They almost felt like a pub team giving it their best shot, complete with Elliot Daly thunder twatting a drop goal conversion over from the touchline. Similar to what I've said about the Paolo Garbisi, Carlo Canna axis cancelling itself out, I'd be very curious to see what England looked like with just Ford but not Farrell against T1 opposition. But apparently Saturday, not the day to find out. But we did instead discover plenty of other things. We found out just how nicely Ireland are starting to prevent others clicking. We learned snails can be kind of awesome, and we learned which of Ireland and England are going to be kind of happy with their Six Nations. Ireland have genuinely got better game on game. With every week they've got better, whereas I don't think England have much cause to panic despite what the papers are saying, and anyone suggesting Eddie Jones should go is being stupid. Stupid. It's a really stupid thing to say. England had a similar dip last World Cup cycle as large parts of the game were found out. After the 2018 dip, he freshened up the squad. Owen Farrell took the captaincy, Elliot Daly moved to fullback, and the likes of Jamie George, Tom Curry, Henry Slade, Carl Sinclair earned starting shirts for the first time. But more importantly, they changed their game. A new dimension in attack was introduced over the course of a few months, and it culminated in the World Cup final. Jones talked before the championship about how he was going to start really innovating ahead of 2023 in the autumn. This happened 3 years into the cycle last time. Here it's happening too. He's essentially hit his teething troubles that's almost an inevitability in any Eddie Jones team a year ahead of schedule, meaning whichever new players he brings in and whatever systems he introduces have an extra year to bed in ahead of the World Cup. And whilst the results might say otherwise, England have played infinitely more good to great rugby in this championship than they did in 2018. We have no reason to believe Eddie Jones doesn't know what he's doing, but this game also gave us plenty to suggest Andy Farrell absolutely does. As Six Nations turns so quickly, and sometimes it's important not to get too caught up in the scurry. Thank you for watching that, and I recognise it is quite late considering the game was played almost 2 weeks ago. I know, I'm sorry. My laptop, people that follow me on Twitter will be familiar, my laptop packed it in. It gave up on me last week, which was a really fun thing to happen. That was really cool, that was really good. But I want to thank Vodafone UK enormously, who obviously sponsored the Lions this year, and they sent me a new laptop to finish this video and make this video on. So thank you enormously. As such, I was a large way through Scotland v Italy and Scotland v Ireland on the old laptop, so hopefully as and when that gets fixed, I can pick those up and put those out. But in the meantime, I'm going to move on to Scotland v France now. That's going to be next. I'm hopefully going to get that up soon enough. But I've also got the Lions team I want to put up in the next couple of days. So there's loads more to come. Please keep an eye out, and I apologise for any and all delays. It's been a long couple of weeks.
Well done, Johnny.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to do the trophy now.
Johnny Sexton lifts the Millennium Trophy. It's a Viking helmet. It marks the 1000th anniversary of the city of Dublin in 1988.